episode of the Coaching Cast podcast is brought to you in partnership with the brilliant Soulfully Single, founded by Julie Wild. Soulfully Single is the supportive, fun and empowering community for sociable singles who want to grow in confidence, reconnect with themselves and others, and use their single time to be the next best version of themselves. Soulfully Single aims to ease loneliness through community, connection and personal growth. So if you find yourself recently single or know someone who is, head over to www.soulfullysingle.co.uk to download a free workbook to help you heal and move on after the end of a relationship, or join one of the feel-good monthly coffee meetups. Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Suzy, and this is the Coaching Cast. We are the No Nonsense podcast, chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's workplace.
We discuss different topics each episode, sharing our ideas, hints and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses and also being qualified coaches. We also try to have a few laughs along the way too, because taking yourself too seriously is just boring. We really hope you enjoy listening. International Women's Day this year is on the 8th of March, just a few days after this episode is released. And so with that in mind, this particular episode is dedicated to International Women's Day. We are supporting the UN Women's International Women's Day theme and rallying call, which is to invest in women and accelerate progress. So stay with us as Suzy and I discuss the topic and share our experiences, and hopefully you'll enjoy listening. So before we dive into this very important and also very chunky topic of International Women's Day for this year in 2024, Suze, tell me, what have you been up to?
Hello. Well, it's been a birthday bonanza, that's for sure. The last time we caught up. So it's been my birthday. So
Hey!
I turned, thank you, whoop, 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 turned 39. And Magic 39. And that was really good because, as the podcast listeners probably know, I don't have the best history with birthdays. I actually had a really good birthday this year.
Yay!
So
you were healthy, wasn't in the hospital.
Woo-woo!
Excellent. You actually had time for yourself.
I did, yeah.
You had fun times. Excellent.
I did. So yeah, that was my birthday. And also, I also want to mark and celebrate the fact that the Coaching Cast has also had a birthday, and we've turned 3.
Yay! 3. Bloody hell.
So yeah,
I can't believe we're 3 years.
Absolutely. And this episode is about marking and investing in women and accelerating that progress. Let's absolutely acknowledge the fact that we have set up the podcast 3 years ago and we're still here.
We're still here. We're still doing it. Yes.
Mark that achievement.
Gosh. And mark all that's happened in that time as well.
Yeah.
Gosh. We've survived a pandemic.
Just
yeah. I know, it's crazy actually, because whenever I talk about the pandemic, it feels like it was a million moons ago. / did it ever actually really happen? Now that could be because of how traumatic it was, and I've parked that somewhere in my brain to protect myself and never want to relive it again. But yeah, it's really weird when I think about it now, the fact that you and I had this conversation about doing a podcast together right in the middle of COVID in 2020, during that brief period of respite in the summer when we were allowed to come back out of our houses before we got locked up again. And then we started recording it during the 3rd lockdown in the UK at the beginning of 21.
I know. And this is
just
now
weird.
Episode 85.
I know. Episode 85. That's nuts. We're 15 away from 100 from our centenary. We definitely need to celebrate the centenary. That will probably likely now be next year, when it in 2025, the centenary. But we should definitely celebrate that milestone, I would have said. There aren't many podcasts that get to 100 episodes, so we should definitely
No.
celebrate it. But anyway, for now, we're celebrating 85 episodes.
Yes,
And that's good enough.
absolutely.
And
And
3 years of
celebrating.
recording.
For sure.
Yeah.
We're still an independent podcast as well. We're not, ran or produced or funded by, a big corporate. So
But you couldn't tell that there were no signals that was the case. That's how good we are. That's how slick this runs,
Yep.
how smoothly the operation
Listen.
is, that you would never know that we weren't corporate funded or supported. Yeah, it's all self-made, this is.
It's all authentic. Definitely.
It's very much, which was always the intention of the podcast. We always said we wanted it to be the most genuine, authentic podcast possible. So yes, I think we're definitely achieving that, if nothing else, in our principles and aims for the podcast. But yeah, 3 years, 85 episodes, lots of different conversations, loads of different guests.
Yeah, shout out to our CBers as well for
massive.
supporting us and
still
listening
being here
to our ramblings, we think, and listening to our ramblings around.
We know you're only here for the bullshit bingos. I think that's the only reason that anyone's here. I think they fast forward to that part of every episode. They don't listen to this section or probably even the topic. They just fast forward to like minute 38 and listen to the bullshit bingo that crops up every episode. Okay, fair enough. Whatever you're here for, thanks for being here. We appreciate it anyway.
We do. All right. Well, I think it was important we mark that milestone.
Absolutely. And your milestone of hitting 39.
Yeah.
Growing old gracefully. Honestly. Who would have thunk it? You're now 39. I hit the big 4A.
Living our best lives.
Your big 4A next year. Woohoo! Can't wait for that. What are you gonna we've got to start planning the celebrations now. But yes, so on that note then, talking about celebrating ourselves, which I'm glad we've acknowledged, let's go and celebrate other women as well and crack on with the topic.
Let's do it.
International Women's Day is a few days away on the 8th of March, and we wanted to bring awareness and support the UN Women's theme for this year, which is Invest in Women and Accelerate Progress. UN Women is the global champion for gender equality, working to develop and uphold standards and create an environment in which every woman and girl can exercise her human rights and live up to her full potential. Taken directly from the UN website, in a world facing multiple crises that are putting immense pressure on communities, achieving gender equality is more vital than ever. Ensuring women's and girls' rights across all aspects of life is the only way to secure prosperous and just economies and a healthy planet for future generations. According to UN Women, 5 key areas need our joint action to ensure women are not left behind. Number 1, investing in women. Number 2, ending poverty. It's predicted more than 342 million women and girls will be living below the poverty line by 2030. Number 3, implementing gender responsive financing. Number 4, shifting to a green economy and care society that amplifies women's voices. And number 5, supporting feminist change makers. So today, Suzy and I wanted to bring awareness and discuss what opportunities are there to better shape a future for women and for all. Suze, this is a big topic, big. So acknowledging the fact that it is a big topic, and we like to keep this podcast as focused and short and punchy as possible for our listeners so they can take the key stuff away. Tell me your thoughts about this particular theme from the UN for this year's International Women's Day.
Yeah, so I think it's a massive topic. We're not going to do it justice in this one podcast episode. So just to put that out there, we're not saying we can, because actually those 5 key areas probably need a podcast episode per area, in fairness.
Agreed.
Because they are big, juicy topics. So we've got number 1, investing in women. Number 2, ending poverty. Number 3, implementing gender responsive financing. Number 4, shifting to a green economy and a care society that amplifies women's voices. And number 5, supporting feminist change makers. So when I was thinking about the preparation for this episode, and also, my experiences I identify as a woman, so my experiences of being a woman in society, and thinking about my experiences too, there were definitely things which stood out for me, which I wanted to kind of share today. So number 4, which is shifting to a green economy and care society that amplifies women's voices. I suppose I just kind of naturally was drawn to this particular point in terms of my own experience, because I had an experience recently where the fact that I have a caring responsibility, so I am a mum and I'm a working mum, and I have responsibilities that come with that. So for example, school or nursery kind of drop off. And this played into a situation that I experienced recently, which was that I wanted to join a local networking group. Okay, so near where I live. And I was really interested in doing that. I went to one of their events at Christmas, which was at lunchtime. So I was like, perfect, this could really work for me. There were some great people there. I met the person, and it is a singular person that runs this group. And I was like, okay, great. So I kind of had Christmas, got to January, and was like, right, let's have a look at the events for 2024. And when I had a look at the events, they all started at 8 a.m. Okay. So there were no other times throughout these events, and they were all face to face. So they weren't online either. So immediately for me as a mum, and for a lot of people who are parents, and a lot of the time, not always, but still, I would say that kind of drop off, that kind of care element can tend to fall more to mums. And so I immediately was unable to attend this for the whole year.
Yeah.
So that opportunity for me to connect with other business owners, talk about myself, my business, talk about what I did, what I offered, what value I could bring was immediately taken away, because actually 8 a.m. on a weekday, I just can't do it, because I'm actually doing the school, routine and the school drop off for my son. Yeah. So I think I immediately was drawn to point 4 around, a society that amplifies women's voices, because in that instance, that doesn't amplify who I am, my voice, that opportunity to talk about my business, what I offer, what I, value. And so actually I was like, I find that really frustrating that I cannot, that's through no fault of my own, been something that I can't, bring, and is not inclusive to me. I actually gave that feedback. So I dropped a note and said, like, look, I'm really interested in joining this event. And this, not just this event, actually, this whole network. And I can't, because there's a barrier there for me. And this is the barrier. This is my kind of experience. And so this, I can't commit. And actually, the people who run it, of which, interestingly, there are no women that run that, and that's fact. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hadn't thought or considered that. So, because they came back to me and said, we have never considered that before for our members. We appreciate you giving us that feedback. We will, have a think about how we can change that for the future. And that was like, great, that's brilliant. Because actually in that conversation, I've driven awareness. And that's what we need. And I think is the point of this episode as well, is about just bringing awareness to our experiences, awareness to these 5 areas that the UN Women group have identified need focus and need support on. And actually by doing that and hopefully bringing awareness, we bring change. And that's how we invest in women and hopefully accelerate progress. So I just wanted to share that kind of experience. And I appreciate that that's not maybe my experiences for me, because I identify as a woman. That particular experience may also be for men as well, because they are, a lot in modern society, also parents who are doing school drop-offs. So I'm not saying it's just for me, but that's my lived experience as a woman.
I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, and I don't think much has changed. So like your example is such a good one about being flexible and adaptable to circumstance, and caregivers' circumstances, whether that's women or not, whether that's men too, to be more accommodating and inclusive. But like we've been talking about that for ages. I think COVID has amplified the topic around flexibility and working conditions and trying to support people to work in a way that best suits them and that enables them to like develop their families. But I still think there's a long way to go on that. Because I still think women are getting penalised in the workplace. Like I think what's happening now is that we just talk about it more, but we've not changed what we do about it. I still think that's the challenge because it's interesting when you've got individuals like, I want to say Mother Pucker because that's all I know her as, who's really championing
Anna
in,
Whitehouse.
thank you, Anna Whitehouse, who's, but again was on social media yesterday, frustrated with Mr. Rees-Mogg because of his still really quite damning and unfounded comments about getting people, I think, back into the workplace and dismissing people's wants, needs, circumstances, and then still marginalising women as a result. And yet Anna Whitehouse has done loads to get more conversation going in government about working rights, flexibility working rights, and has made a lot of progress, but you're still hit with those types of attitudes, I think. So that's really frustrating, I think.
I would agree. I think those myths which then circulate, because she's done a lot of work with some other people who funded a research study on getting the facts, actually.
Yes,
so
yeah,
like getting
absolutely.
the facts around the benefits of flexible working, the benefits of getting more women back into the workplace, and also with declining that kind of gender pay gap. And there's a massive study around that which really factualizes, and there's some powerful stuff in that. I don't have it to hand, but there's some really powerful facts within that around the benefits. And so it's frustrating that they get overlooked because they're factual, and those myths which get bounded around within society still very much have the predominant narrative in those situations. Frustrating. Come on, let's get with the facts. I'd say.
But I think that's still where there's such a long way to go.
That
it's fine if we're talking about it. It starts with conversation and raising awareness, but it's what we do about it. And I think that's still the big hurdle, which is what change can actually be made. So that fifth area of the UN's sort of key action points around supporting feminist change makers, absolutely true, because they do need support so that actually what they're talking about turns into actual usable, appropriate action. So it's not just that they're making the noise, bringing the topics to be discussed, but something's actually being done about it. But I do think, some of this is going to take time because we're talking about changing like fundamental constructs of our society and how we've operated for so long. It's not going to be an overnight job to undo a lot of that, or therefore to change a lot of the thought process around it, because we've got stuck into modes of thinking and we've got stuck in gender-based modes of thinking. And I think I'm guilty of doing it to myself in that respect, because I myself am just used to being in that gender, like female gender box. And I think sometimes it takes me to go, oh, hang on, that's not actually true, or I'm now conforming to a stereotype. And that, I think that's quite challenging in itself to get out of, because that's what we're used to and that's what's easy.
That's interesting you say that, because I had this conversation with my son. So my son is 4, and he said the other day, a fireman came to nursery to show the fire engine and like show everything. And I was like, a fireman or a firefighter? He was like, a fireman. And I was like, okay, so was there a fire lady there, if we're going to go down that route? He was like, no. And I was like, okay, so it's a firefighter. I was like, because ladies can be firefighters as well. And because at nursery they unintentionally led with the narrative that it was a fireman coming. And also a lot of on TV, not all the time, they have quite, I'd say Fireman Sam, they have really good representation.
I'm pleased to hear it.
I never
That's
thought I'd be talking
evolved.
about fire and salmon this
I love it. Yeah, but it's important though, isn't it? Because
episode.
all this gender-based, like it does start from children.
Yeah.
And about how we feed children and about how we ourselves genderize children.
Exactly. So my point was, linking to your piece around like the societal roles that are created, is that actually there's a responsibility from an early age to broaden their horizons, that actually, a firefighter can be can be a woman as equally as well as the man that he saw in that car park at nursery.
Yeah. But I mean, well picked up, because that's not something I would have even thought about, and I think it's personal to everybody, in so much that we will all talk about these topics in different ways in terms of what we pick up on, what we think is important to address. I just wouldn't have thought about that, to be fair. But that's, again, partly me as well, in terms of what I'm used to hearing, what I've got comfortable hearing, and how I think about it. But that's interesting. But I think your point and that story is where we can all make changes quicker. When you look at like what's possible for all of us, and I look at this list for the UN, and it is overwhelming and it is scary.
Yeah.
Ending poverty, bloody hell. I mean, we all need to do that, but that's not necessarily within all of our control, clearly. And so I think sometimes these topics can feel so insurmountable. They can feel too big for all of us. And like, how do we tackle them? Where do you start? And then you can feel a bit paralyzed by them. So I think the areas to look at are those where you feel like, actually, I can make a difference. And I think anything where we can be better at being more inclusive and supportive to others and ourselves, and standing up for ourselves, and then raising those sorts of challenges like you have, to enable things to be better for everybody, us too, are the places we can start. Because I find that very interesting that no one has brought that to their attention before.
I did.
Now that says to me that women before have not given the feedback, or they have conformed to the format, even if it doesn't work for them. And I know a lot of women who do that, who go, do you know what, if that is the format, if that's the way it's done, then that's what I'll fit myself to, with quite detrimental impact, because I've seen that happen in the workplace too often as well. Because it's not sustainable, and it doesn't work. And I think that's where we've got to be better as well, about supporting people to recognise what's better for them and how they can achieve that, and how we can adapt and flex together to create working conditions, where feasible. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's always, the expectation should never be that a workplace should literally be able to flex to every single individual's requirements. I don't think that's practical, but I do think it's about finding compromise and working with people to see, well, what is achievable and how do we do that, rather than just trying to fit everybody into just one way of doing things, because that's just not, well, it's not realistic. But it's also what I think causes so many people to quit. Definitely women, that's what I've seen before. And that's where you get those scary stats about how many women leave the workplace, how much skill is lost in the workplace because of it. And that's where I think we've got to get better at just having conversations and looking at like what can be done.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think the third point that the UN kind of women group raised, which is around implementing gender responsive financing. So again, when I was looking at this, I was really drawn to that one as well, because I do a lot of work. A lot of my clients are in scale up businesses, of which I predominantly work actually with women.
Yeah.
I'm just reflecting in the moment now. Yeah, a lot of the women clients I work with in scale ups are women who have found a startup, and then it's in scale up stage. And actually I can think of probably two who have gone through kind of rounds of investment. So you tend to go through kind of, there's like 3 different stages of investment. You kind of go through like seed stage, and then you go Series A, Series B funding, without getting too technical. And I think definitely for a couple of those clients of mine, when they've gone through some of those investment stages and rounds, they have found that process more challenging in terms of the outcome than maybe they had anticipated based on the kind of conversations they'd had with peers. So those peers being maybe kind of male founders. So that gender responsive financing piece is an interesting one. And I've got an article here which I wanted to share because I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So this is from this was published last year. So the data I think is from 2022. So we're a couple of now kind of years ahead, but it says 1/5 of all businesses in the UK are run by women in 2022.
I was going to say it's a very small stat because I've been reading about this as well.
Yes, it's a really, really interesting one. And basically where there's a piece in it that says, and I'll publish this on our Instagram when this episode goes out. So there's an improving pipeline of female-led startups and scale-ups, many of whom are disruptors and innovators in their field. Government and investor-led capital funding initiatives are being established to support startups and SMEs looking to gain finance. However, there is a long-standing view supported by data demonstrating that traditional money lending methods follow the conventional practices of favouring finance businesses owned by men. Most lending businesses are run by men, and the lending models created by bank lenders are also predominantly male-led. So, kind of articles, raises the question, is it as simple as male business owners are taken more seriously than women?
Yeah.
Some women business owners called out being viewed as part-timers because they have children or are perceived as less serious professionals than their male counterparts. And so for them, inequality in funding is absolutely prevalent. However, it does go on to say that there is progression in this area. And I would definitely say, in my experience, there's definitely progression within this area, but it still exists, I think. And that actually, if you are a woman founder with a great business, a great startup idea, and you're scaling it and you're looking for investment, getting to that point of investment can be more challenging than if you are a man going into that room and having those conversations. And that's because of those conditions, those societal structures and conditions that are there, i.e. traditional banking has had more men historically in those seats making those decisions than they have women. I now know that that's changing and that's progressing. Is it to the rate that we would like? Probably not, but it's absolutely an acknowledgement of progression. So yeah, interesting. And I will share this article because it's really, really interesting. It's by SME Capital. And it's from March 2023, so about a year ago, but I'll share it on our Instagram when we publish this episode if you want to have a look and a read on, because there's loads of stuff around actually women on boards as well. And I've got some great colleagues in Manchester who do a lot of work around women on boards in terms of really thinking about that ratio and raising the profile, and actually the brilliant advantage there is by having women on boards as well. So yeah, really interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, that's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it in respect of the bias that exists even in the process of securing finance. I think there's a lot that holds women back from starting up businesses, and that is a lot to do, I think, with circumstance and that time availability, especially for those who are in caregiving roles. But I think so much is to do with the fact that so many women do suffer, more so than men, with notions of self-doubt, lack of confidence, self-belief, much more so than men do, I think. I mean, I coach around confidence, and that is not, I would say, gender specific. I support both men and women around their confidence and leadership, but I would definitely say there's a higher percentage of women who struggle with that, or at least are open and honest and self aware enough to know that that's the challenge and that's what they bring to coaching. So they have more of that courage to talk about it. But again, I think that's where we still have society judgment around men and being able to talk about their own challenges anyway. But I think it's interesting then to think about it in respect of even those women who have the confidence, the ideas to bring to the table to secure funding could then be held back by the process itself being so biased and again overly dominated by men in those positions. So it's a really interesting one. I know when I saw that in the points for the UN, I actually looked it up to understand it better, to understand, well, what is gender-based financing? And again, it can be related to financing being directed in a way that is more inclusive, so that it actually aligns more to both gender and is taking into consideration women in terms of the process like you've described, but also then the way it's directed and set up, which is really interesting.
So there's a brilliant book on this topic, in the sense of, well, this is a massive topic, but some of the kind of things that we've talked about and touched upon here very briefly. So there's a brilliant book that one of our CBBs directed me to, and I was talking to them about the fact that we were making this episode. So I haven't read it, but I am going to read it.
Oh, cool.
And it's a great book. It's called Invisible Woman, and it's available wherever you buy your books. And it's exposing data bias in a world designed for men, essentially. So what it talks about is exposing like intricacies that you wouldn't even, or things that are around, or that just are constructs in our society that you wouldn't even realize has a bias. And we'll put a link to this as well on our Instagram. But yeah, Invisible Woman, it's a Sunday Times bestseller. And it just really, really, really good book, I think, in terms of raising awareness and maybe just kind of thinking, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that. So, as we've said, this is a big topic for International Women's Day. Quite rightly, because it is a big topic and there is a lot still to do. So I think for those of you who've been listening, obviously we've shared the 5 key areas that the UN has drawn attention to support the theme this year for them, which is investing in women and accelerating progress. And like we acknowledged, it can feel like some of these topics are overwhelming, out of reach. But I think what we've been keen to share today is areas where we can make sense of it in our day-to-day and then consider things that we can do to still make a difference. So I think we're going to now share our top tips as to how to bring to life potentially some of these key areas for yourself. So Suze, for you, where would you start in terms of how to really connect with this sense of supporting women, accelerating progress, being inclusive for women in our day-to-days when we bring this back into our reality?
So look, I can only come at this from my own lived experience. And I think this is different from a lot of other women and people who will be listening to this episode. But I think from my experiences, coming back to that first thing that I opened with, which was around that networking event, which now no longer was inclusive for me. I couldn't, I didn't have that opportunity because of the way it was structured and set up. So I think actually asking yourself, if there's anything you can do either in your role or in anything that you are responsible for that can make it more inclusive for women, but also for anyone, actually. So where are the opportunities for you to increase that inclusivity for all? So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is actually about learning. So I think if this is kind of pricked your ears in any way, in the sense of like, I'm interested to know more, go and find out more, because actually that's the only way we are ever going to be able to move some of this forward in a significant way, is us, by all of us, becoming more informed, essentially. And when we become more informed, we can challenge, or we can show a different perspective in a more confident, I think, and also just in a more inclusive way in itself. So yeah, go and find out more and learn about it. And then the third thing I would say on this area is about and we've not touched upon it in the podcast conversation, but I do think it's an important one, is just thinking about how you can bring allyship into your day-to-day and in the environments that you're in. So allyship is, about kind of, yes, standing for others who may be marginalized, and being aware of that and thinking about, how can I be that voice? How can I support that group? How can I make things easier? And really encouraging that as much as you can, and showing the way yourself in allyship. And that's a whole other episode as well. So I very, very briefly touched upon it there. But yeah, there would be my 3 top tips on this area based on my own lived experience, I think, in this.
Fab. No, thanks for that. And I would add, check your bias. I think if you don't think you are biased, check it. That's what it's something I probably hold to myself quite strongly, because I try not to be biased, but I'm sure I am, and I'm sure I do show bias, because I think it is natural to. I think it can often be entrenched in us. Our bias is built of our lived experiences, and that will come through all lived experiences: childhood, upbringing, parentage, schools, etc., etc. It's part of everything. So actually, so often it's not conscious, it's unconscious, and that's where I think it's always worthwhile checking it. So I think that really caused me to think of that quite heavily when you were talking about the gender-based financing, because I think that can be so true in a lot of our processes. When I think of interview and recruitment processes, when I think really always checking in on yourself about the decisions you're making and what they're based on, and ensuring that you can align your decisions to fact. I do think checking on your bias, ensure that you understand what's informing your decisions, ensuring that you understand what facts you're basing it around rather than opinion, or, as I said, experience. I think that way you'll always ensure that you're being as fair as you can to people at all times, and therefore as inclusive as you can be at all times. So, big topic for today, for International Women's Day. I wouldn't expect it to be anything less for such an important day, because it's still such a big, important topic. But Suzy and I will collate those tips that we've offered, as Suzy's rightly said, based on our lived experience, that could be helpful for you to consider and think about how, if it's relevant, you can incorporate that into your day-to-day when honouring this topic. So we'll share that at the end of the show.
It's now time for Bullshit Bingo, the feature where we call out phrases which get commonly used in the workplace, which, quite frankly, make us cringe. Our Bullshit Bingo for today's episode came from one of you, our CBBs on LinkedIn, from our recent call out. So thank you very much. And it is, it's a good one. It's a living, breathing document. Fantastic. I love this one.
So good. I haven't heard this for ages.
I've not heard it for ages, but I actually heard my husband say this the other day.
Yeah, I bet you did. Good old Steve.
I don't know if it's because I had this, I was like pulling the bullshit bingos together, and maybe this was front of mind subconsciously, and then I just happened to hear him say it in the background a few days later when he was in the office. So yeah, brilliant. It's a living, breathing document. Absolute joy this gave me when this came in from one of my followers. Thank you very much for sending this in. Oh, so good.
The gravity we give to things. Don't you just love it? I love the way a living, breathing document. Like, that's what we do, isn't it? We elevate the status of the most mundane objects in the workplace. No wonder we all take ourselves too seriously and work and are stressed. And get into meltdown mode around working. If we're referring to documents as living things, Jesus, isn't it brilliant? I love it. It's a living, breathing document, just to like really elevate how important it is. And to give people the sense that they can make changes whenever they like, which they absolutely can't. That drives me nuts. I'm like, no, you can't. Let's just publish it and crack on. Like, but isn't it brilliant? I love the fact Steve used this recently. Well, thanks for this one, LinkedIn community. And as Suzy mentioned, this was offered following a call out for more bullshit bingo phrases for us to feature in the show. So please do keep sending them through to us. You can contact either of us through LinkedIn. You will find Suzy and I there. So Suzy Hunt and Lisa Robin Wood. Use our names. You will find who we are. And you can also message us via our Instagram page. So that will be via @thecoachingcast. So please do contact us there as well. But we just love to hear them and feature them as and when they're happening in real time. So please get in touch. So we are coming to the end of today's really big, important episode where we've been supporting the UN Women's theme for International Women's Day this year, which is invest in women and accelerate progress. So Suzy and I's top tips to support this topic and really help with inclusion for women in the day-to-day are as follows. Number one is being mindful of exactly that, being inclusive. So understanding individuals' needs wherever we can and ensuring that we are incorporating those and supporting them where it's practically possible. So really important always to be maintaining that conversation and putting your curiosity hat on. I can't speak now. Curiosity hat on, like we always encourage here at the Coaching Cast. Number two is really educating and informing yourself. So Suzy shared some great resources, which we will be putting in the show notes. That's just an example of how to keep yourself educated and informed and really supporting yourself to be able to assert in certain scenarios where necessary. Number three, we have, I think, and this was great actually, because Suzy followed this example today in her story, which is don't just accept what you see and what you're offered, but offer challenge where you're able to do so, where you feel confident to do so. So question the status quo where you see things that you don't think support you to be your best or support others to be their best. And that's where we're really advocating being the voice. And Suzy mentioned allyship. So if you can be the voice for others, challenge where you can and ensure that things can be better. And then my last one was around checking your bias. We all have it. It's natural. It's human. Don't berate yourself for it. Just keep yourself honest. So really consider what's informing your decisions and where are your facts. So some self-coaching questions to additionally support you in this exercise and endeavour is, in respect of this topic today, really think about what have you learnt? Hopefully something, but what have you learnt? Number two is, how can I support accelerating progress for women in my day-to-day? And that can include yourself as well, by the way. Number three, what will you do differently following listening to this episode? And finally, number four, what's your first action that you're going to take? So don't worry if you can't remember all of these questions or all of our top tips. These will all be on our Instagram page at the Coaching Cast over the course of the next few weeks. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our episode on International Women's Day from 2022. And that was on breaking the bias. I love that. Brilliant. How seamless was that? There's me saying about checking in on your bias. We actually did a whole episode on it. So that would have been episode 8 in season 4. And you can listen to that wherever you find your podcasts and also via our website and our YouTube channel.
And talking of episodes, we will have another new episode for you in early April. And that episode is going to be on how to get to know yourself better. Ooh,
my favourite topic.
Yes. CBeebies, we know you're really busy, but it would mean the world to us if you could just spend a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It helps the podcast more than you know, and it means you don't have to worry about remembering to download it either. So, absolute bonus.
So we like to end each episode of the Coaching Cast with our personal song recommendation, giving you energy and motivation as you launch into the next part of your working day. It's my choice this week, and I've chosen a 90s classic that I've not heard for ages, and then it cropped up on the radio, and I was like, what a banger. And that is Babies by Pulp. And it's so good. I really encourage you to stick it on.
Oh, I will do.
Yes, brilliant. So thank you so much for listening to us today, CBBS. Have a good few weeks. We will see you again next month in April. And remember, you've got this.